Hi, everyone. Hi. Hope everybody's doing well on this Tuesday. If you can have your camera on, I would appreciate it. And I know Juan would appreciate seeing your smiling faces. We have our guest here, so we want to make him feel welcome. What we're going to do is talk to Juan for the first part of the class, and then with any time we have left at the end, I can answer questions about our projects and put you in your groups to be able to start thinking about your research project. So without further ado, we want to get started while we have our guest here. This is Juan Garcia Jimenez. Let's welcome him to our Zoom. Thank you, Juan, so much. And Juan was just like you 2 years ago, 2020, except it was just like during the pandemic getting started that the semester that he was graduating, we were in person on the second floor, DMI Capstone classes. I remember all the people that were sitting near him in that room. And then spring break, we never came back, and we did everything the rest of the semester in Zoom. So he very much can understand what you're going through in terms of Zoom classes and having disruptions to your education. And, you know, he has done really well. Let me get a couple more people in here since graduating in 2022. So we're going to take some time to hear from him today about the things that he's been doing. So Juan, the first thing I want to talk to you, and then I hope you all will have questions for him, but the first thing I want you to talk about is, you know, when you decided to come to college, what were your goals? And then how did you come upon the DMI major and make that your degree?
Well, first of all, hi, everybody. Nice to see y'all. So to answer that question, I didn't know what I wanted to do coming to Texas State. So I started my college education at the University of Houston doing biomed engineering. So a very different path to where I am currently. Realized that was not my passion. So I ended up going to community college for a little bit over a year, got my associates, and then transferred to Texas State. At the time, I thought wanted to go into video production, multimedia production. So my first step was kind of joining KTSW. So I did that for while I was at Texas State. But my first introduction to DMI was Dale's class. So that was my first hint of I'm really enjoying this. I really want to do this.
Was that the FDOM? Was that the FDOM class? Yeah. So a lot of people,
FDOM.
and I think many of you took the FDOM and were like, I want to major in this stuff. And that's been the best advertisement for DMI, having the classes that both John Zmickley and Dale Blassingame have taught. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the introduction of doing it. And then I started taking a little bit more advanced classes. So the web development class with you, Cindy, and what was it? The social media one was also amazing. And then just the advanced versions of those were really cool. But I don't know, it was really confusing at first coming in, but once I got that little glimpse of me enjoying something and actually being passionate towards it again, made me stick with DMI, and it's been amazing. I've told Cindy this many times, I can't rave about the DMI program more. It's awesome.
Well, you know, I'm happy to hear that. And I'm really glad that you're able to share that with these students, because many of them are about to graduate. Or if they're not graduating this semester, they're going to be graduating soon. And so, you know, to give them a hope that there is light ahead. And, you know, there may be some challenges, but you kind of deal with them. Juan was a really excellent student in our program. He definitely displayed a lot of coding capabilities. And so I was really, you know, I enjoyed his projects. I enjoyed working with him on helping him with his projects and creating his portfolio, which they're all working on their portfolios right now. So you graduated in the height of the pandemic. I remember that time frame being I was very nervous for students graduating in that time frame. But when I think about the 2020 graduates, I think almost every one of our guest speakers are people from your class that I'm having. It's Ashley Romo and Ann Cox are coming. I may have some others.
Awesome,
they were all 2020 spring people. So everybody turned out fine from that year. So talk about when you first graduated, what it was like in trying to find a job.
So like Cindy said, this was mid pandemic, everything was still getting pretty crazy since we didn't really know a lot. So at the time I had moved back with my dad in Houston, and I was just kind of shooting applications kind of everywhere. So again, the cool thing about DMI is you're kind of prepped for a lot of things. So I was like applying to like social media manager kind of stuff, copywriting, web development. Web development was the thing that I wanted to do most. So I did a lot more of my applications towards that, but I felt prepared for like other roles as well. So I could apply to a lot more stuff. Like I had a lot of doors open up. So I got pretty lucky. I got an interview for a startup in San Antonio at the time. What was a little weird was that it was in person mid-pandemic. So we were like going into the office, everybody was masked up. We were really far apart from each other. So that was a little difficult. But yeah, before actually getting the job, there was a lot of other interviews that I had to do. So I guess one thing to take away is don't feel discouraged if you're throwing applications out there and like you don't get a reply or you get a no. There's a lot of that in there, unfortunately, but you have to like push through it because all you're looking for is that one yes. Hopefully more than one yes. So you have options, but yeah, it's there's a lot of opportunities, thankfully, for y'all out there, especially now that a lot of companies are moving online and seeing the potential for like the younger generation to like come up here and like throw y'all's ideas out there. It's amazing. Also, the what's it called? The program is pretty well known in the industry. So like if they see you coming out of like the Texas State DMI program, like you already have like a little bit of an advantage over a lot of other candidates.
That just makes me so happy. Always makes me happy to hear that the word is spreading. So this should make you all feel good too. You know, that first job that you had, I thought it was interesting that you were a web developer, kind of like on the marketing side of the company. And I think that creates some good opportunities for students like ours. So maybe talk a little bit about what you did in that job and what you learned.
Yeah, so the company was a 5G internet company. Pretty much their mission was to help underserved communities in San Antonio and provide them with internet access. So again, this was mid-pandemic, so a lot of the kids were going home and a lot of those communities just didn't have access. A lot of kids were falling behind in their schoolwork. So that was the mission. Since it was a startup, a lot of the time we had was spent like fundraising money to actually like, get the projects done. So a lot of my work was helping set up pages for investors and all that kind of stuff, and then helping one of my teammates set up like social media campaigns and all of that, and integrating it within like our website. So we had like forms set up in our website that we had to connect to like our marketing division that would call them. So there was a lot of like interaction between like a lot of the teams, but you have to wear a lot of hats in like those smaller companies. But
do you remember when we did startup funding in the capstone class? Because we just talked about that last week. Do you recall like maybe thinking, because I think most students do, like, this is never going to affect me. I'm not going to be asking for $1 million. And suddenly you're working for a startup doing the marketing to help them get investments.
Yeah, it's always crazy because when you're in class, you're like, why am I learning this? Like, is this applicable ever?
Nobody feels that way, right?
Ever, never. Like you don't feel that way. But then we like that happened. I'm like, okay, like I remember seeing this in class. And then in my current job, we had like a recent project that we just finished that we used like Agile. I don't know if y'all have gone through that yet.
That's today's topic that they're doing on their own. Yeah.
Okay, so pay attention to that. Also get your certification in that because they pay a lot of money and there's not that many people that do it. So that's a big opportunity right there. And a lot of big companies are like doing it a lot because it's so effective. It's crazy effective, yeah.
So, okay, so that was that first job, and you did that about a year in San Antonio, and then the Gannett opportunity. What was Gatehouse? Was it still Gatehouse when you got the job? No, okay, it was already
Gannett.
Gatehouse and Gannett merged. Gatehouse, I think many of you know, owns USA Today and The Statesman and hundreds of other papers, and so this opportunity came up, and I have some people that I know that work in Gannett, and they had sent me this job description. And I thought Juan was doing fine at the job that he was at, but sometimes I'll push something to people and I'll be like, I think you're probably fine, but if you're interested, this might be a good job for you. And so tell them about, you know, how you went through that process.
Yeah, so I was mid meeting with like the CEO of like the company I was at in San Antonio, and I get an email on my phone and it's like Cindy. So I'm like, okay, like I'll read it after the meeting. And it's like, oh, like I hope you're doing well. Like there's this really cool job opportunity that just opened up. I feel like it would fit like what you want to do. So I like checked it out and I was like pretty interested. I was well, not pretty interested. I was like super interested. So I updated my portfolio, updated my resume, fixed everything on my website to like update everything, and threw my application out there. Told Cindy, she put me in touch with Sean, who worked at Gannett already, who
He was a grad student in
graduated.
our program. Yeah.
Yeah, I had met him before at a mass comm event, so I already
He
knew
came to
him.
Mass Comm Week. Everything's coming together in this talk. Yeah.
She's not paying me, by the way. Like I'm saying this like she's not paying
We
me.
talked for 1 minute
Yeah.
before this started. So yeah.
No, so I had already like had like a talk with Sean before. So I kind of knew him. So it was just like reconnecting with him, like asking him like what all like they were looking for. And he was like giving me some advice. So I told him I put in the application and then I got the interview on Monday. So I think she sent me the email on Wednesday, fixed everything on Thursday night, applied on Friday, got my interview on Monday, and then I had four back-to-back interviews like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with like four different teams in Gannett. And then I got my offer the next Friday.
That's crazy.
So it was chaotic,
Yeah.
which it was insane, but very fortunate to
It's
like
great when it turns out that way. They don't always go that fast. I mean, I've counseled students over very long interview processes, and sometimes, they end up getting the job, and sometimes they're just contracted pain. But this one went so fast that even I was surprised by it, but they clearly needed someone and they were impressed with you. And I think they also, like you're saying, like the reputation of the program is getting around, even though Sean was a grad student, they like Sean and they wanted another person like Sean, and you fit the bill for that. So cool.
yeah, no, exactly. So Sean had a really good like relationship with Carlene, who's my boss currently, because he would do like the web development for them, but he was in a different team. So they needed an in-house developer, which is what I am now. But Sean's boss, Tony, who you know, Tony Elkins, he knows the program very well. So he's the one that was like, okay, he's coming out of the program. Like Sean came out of that same program as a grad student. So like we need to pull people from here. So he also helped sway that decision because one of my interviews was with Sean and Tony.
So because you work for a company like Gannett it's a newspaper company, a media company, we should say, but you're at the corporate headquarters of this company that owns all these newspapers. Talk about how the role of a web developer fits in that environment.
So it's a little weird, I guess. So I sit on the PR and comms team, which as a web developer feels weird because most of our developers are in the product side, but all those developers help support the local publications and like the USA Today. So I'm in like the corporate side. So all I do is support the corporate side. So Gannett.com, all of that and its redesign, like that's just me. So I'm the only one that's doing this. And then if it's like a very big project, then I get help from like Sean or people in the product side that specialize on like the specific thing that I need. Um, so it's a little weird because it is very like I mean, I don't know, the company's massive. So people like are specialized in like certain things that I had no idea like even existed before. But just getting to like meet all these people, knowing all the resources that are available has been like awesome. So there's been a lot of learning. There's been like nonstop learning. Every day is like a new opportunity, which is really cool. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I've gotten like a lot of support from my team because they know that it's like an awkward place to like sit in as a developer. But it's also nice that they like help facilitate that like interaction with like the product side if I do need help. But a lot of the projects that we're doing now are fairly small besides like the redesign, which I don't know what we're going to talk about today, but all of that's been ongoing in the background.
I mean, I definitely want to talk about some of the projects that you've worked
Mhm.
on, whatever you can tell us about, you know, the big ones, the small ones, kind of, I think the students would like to get a sense of what you do. And again, this is just another example of you're in a media company in a sort of a PR marketing function, but you're a web developer. So there's so many ways that you can kind of enter into a technology-based web development field. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think they've even grown since the pandemic.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so many opportunities. But as far as the projects, I'm currently working on a fairly big one that we're redesigning the whole feel of the company. So that comes from logos, fonts, copy, images, all of that is getting overhauled. Um, it's been an ongoing process for almost a year. So when I got brought in, it was already being talked about. But since then, we've gone through the whole process. So that comes from wireframing everything to the design, to the development, and then feedback rounds, cleaning everything up, and then implementation of like analytics, the social aspect, all of that. So it's been really cool. But I work really closely with our social team. So a lot of the smaller projects that I do, so like more of like my day-to-day stuff, I work with them. So some of the social strategy that we're doing now is highlighting a lot of our employees. So one of the things Gannett focuses on a lot is diversity and inclusion. So one of the things that we wanted to do was highlight that. So a lot of our employees are getting like stories written about them, and we want to do that. So we build pages for them. So it's like for our inclusion side, we build a whole page with their story of like this employee, and then we highlight them in our website as well as like on social. So we're closely with like that strategy team to say, okay, we need the development to like start here so we can have it ready for our social post to go out. And then after all that happens, we like come back together to like pull analytics and see how we can optimize to make everything better for like the future month or like the future like round of highlighted stories. So there's like
That sounds so
two
cool.
whole
Sounds
different
like a
sides.
really
Yeah.
cool project.
Yeah. No, they're super fun. And again, like you get to see a lot of people's like different stories and like where they're coming from and how they ended up like at the company. And it's amazing.
I think you even mentioned this when you told me about the first job. Having some idea about how content is made is helpful as a web developer because you can jump in and help with content problems and tone
Mhm.
and positioning. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's still the case.
Yeah, no, 100%. So the people that bring that content to us is the um IDE team, so inclusion, diversity, and equity. So they're the ones that go out and like reach out to the employees, or like if somebody like nominates somebody to like get highlighted, they're the ones that reach out and like get their information, get their story, and like build that out. But there's been times that sometimes that specific story might fit better with like the next month's like package of stories that we're doing. So for example, this month for October, we had a breast cancer awareness story, but we're moving it to November because it was like caretaker awareness month. Um, so that whole story gets moved, but we have to be like really flexible with like our workflow because a lot of the times we have to like make sure we have release forms for people to like have their images actually appear on our website. We have to make sure like the social side of everything is like works. So if there's like an event that is happening that gets priority, we have to push everything back. So yeah, you have to be like always on your toes about this kind of stuff, which is I enjoy it a lot because I like working under pressure, but sometimes it does get a little overwhelming. But I mean, thankfully I have a really cool team behind me that helps me out through like those times.
You might want to talk a little bit about the specific skills you use. I mean, these students have all learned things like HTML and CSS. Some are learning JavaScript. Some, working with content management systems. What kind of things do you use when you're working on these projects?
So allgannett.com is on WordPress.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So if you like WordPress, you should like focus on it. So one of the developers that I work for this redesign, he's like a senior like WordPress developer, and they hired him because he's so good at just WordPress. But if you do want to go into like the website of stuff, I would say HTML, CSS, obviously. JavaScript libraries are super important, specifically like Bootstrap. I use Bootstrap on the daily. So that's because of DMI, but there's like React and like all these other ones. And then a lot of new ones come out almost always. So just make sure you don't like become a jack of all trades. Like try to focus on like one thing and get really good at that one thing. That's like just the web development side. But in social, there's a lot of skills. So like the copy side of stuff, like we have people that specialize on that. The cool part about like our team is that everybody's really good at like a lot of different things. So we get to like support each other, and like if somebody is like it's getting like not necessarily overworked, but if they're like really busy with like other projects and stuff like that, we can always like pull in and like make sure all of the work gets done and support each other, which is really cool. So you get a lot better, a lot of stuff just being ingrained into that like team. My favorite has been analytics. I've learned a lot about analytics and like data recently. So it's been really cool. But yeah, you learn a lot on the job.
I mean, you're really speaking my language here, because whenever people ask me about the DMI program, I'm like, the thing that makes us different than other mass comm areas is that we focus on coding, data, and analytics, and design to some extent, less so on some of the multimedia things that they could get in other parts of the degrees, because we want to have our own competencies. And you just mentioned every one of those things that you use regularly in your job. Yeah. Yeah. I want to see if anybody has any questions right now at this point for Juan. I'm sure there's a lot of things running around in your head in terms of your future, and you might be able to ask some questions that would help you get some advice. Anybody? Okay, let's start with Anna. Go ahead, Anna, and then we got lots of questions, so that's always good.
Hi, Juan. So my question for you is, after web design, what other classes did you take that helped you like get better at coding, or like what did you do to, just like further those skills before you got the web design job? Because like I took the web design class and I was like, this is good, but I did not learn enough to like do it full time,
Oh man, I don't remember the names of the classes. It's like the advanced web class.
The coding class that some
Yeah.
of you are in with me right now. So that is also an ad for the coding class. And
Yeah.
John Smickley and I both teach it. Yeah.
I took the advanced social media analytics class. That one was super helpful because you get certifications through that, which look really good on your resume.
They all have to take that because that's a required class. Yeah. So they've all had that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that looks amazing on your resume, by the way. Add it to your LinkedIn as well as like a little badge. If you can take LinkedIn courses too, those are super helpful. And then if you have time like outside of classes, do like Udemy or like any of those kind of what is it called, like not necessarily certifications but just classes that like help you get better. Those definitely helped me. I don't want to like give you all a false impression. I had like a coding background before web like design and all that kind of stuff at Texas State, so I came in with like a little bit of knowledge, but those resources will help me get to that point because I was still like in my learning phase, because I was doing a lot of like back-end work before web development. So I was still fairly new, but those resources were always like super, super helpful. And then just get really good at Googling. It saves you. Like knowing how to like actually type in like what your problem is on Google is like a secret skill, because like two people can have the same issue, and if you're just good at knowing what you're looking for, you'll get there. And you'll never really know everything, but you have to know how to become a really good problem solver. I think that's where I was trying to get to, is problem solving.
these students hear me say all the time, if you don't practice coding, you're not going to get better at coding. And so, everything that you're saying is like use resources, try things, Google things, take some code samples and make them your own. And, like what I said to the class yesterday was, you're not going to get some divine intervention here that's going to suddenly make you this great coder. It literally is putting in the time and practice, have little projects, have an idea of what you want to create. Kayla was in my office hours before, and she had this idea for her portfolio, and we're already often thinking about how we're going to make that happen. And so that's the way people get better, is you think of something and then you figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah, no, and use Cindy's office hours. She helps you so much. But yeah, no, the best way to become a problem solver is to find a lot of problems. So the more you do it and the more you like hit these roadblocks, the more you're going to know how to solve them in the future. It really is like the biggest lesson I learned.
It's such a confidence builder too, when you're able to solve a problem, and that great feeling when it works. It's like, I got that, I figured that out. Okay, so I want to get a few more questions here. Kyle, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the marketing side. You said you worked a little bit on the marketing team. Was it for the San Antonio position, or was it for the USA?
Kind of them both.
Do you provide like a service? Like, are you building like splash pages type work when you do web design in that specific area, or what's the service you provide on the marketing side?
So I guess this was a lot more on the San Antonio side. So our marketing was more for leads, like you're trying to generate leads. So a lot of it was trying to bring people into our website. So it was a lot of like traffic generation and stuff like that. That's where you work with like your media and your social media team. So they'll create a post on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, to drive traffic to the website, and then you engage them on the website, which then makes them fill out a form. So now you have a lead, which you can call and hopefully get money. So the service we provided was just build our like pages as accessible as possible. That's always been like one thing that I really focus on, is making sure everything is like easily accessible to the user. So whenever we were trying to raise money, there's a lot of information on the company that a lot of these investors want to like learn. So making sure they're actually getting that information easily is it's super important, because a lot of companies, they like say they do all these cool things, but they don't really prove it. So that was like our thing. If they can like get their answers quickly, then that engagement like keeps them there. If that engagement like starts like withering down, you're not really going to accomplish your goal. So it's making sure like you do it quickly and efficiently and accessible.
Thank you.
I mean, even in what you're doing for Gannett now, when you're talking about writing these profiles about employees, that's sort of, it's not the news, it's like the marketing and the HR and the support of the company. So it's just another opportunity to have a digital product. Yeah,
it's a different goal. So in this one, obviously we're not aiming for money. We're aiming to highlight our employee base. So but it kind of follows like the same guidelines. You want to keep the user engaged. So you start it from like the strategy side, like whenever we're first developing like the whole strategy behind what we want this campaign to be. We're like, we want to show their faces. We want to give a personality to all this like words that are on this page. Because if it was just text, obviously it's not going to keep people there. So it was making sure people know that this is like a real person, that they're like reading their story so they can connect. So it really depends on your goal of like what you're trying to do with like your website. But you always have to like understand what your end goal is, and then you can just work there.
Great, that's great advice. Cecily and your kitty cat, what is your question?
So I have like two. How do you get Agile certified? And then is there anything that like in a job posting that you've ever seen that like we should avoid, like red flags? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good question. So Agile certification, I mean, there's courses specifically for that. I'm not 100% sure like which resources you need to like go to like actually do it. I think in the lesson that y'all are going to be doing today, y'all might find that out. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are different places that you can get the Agile certification, but the more important thing is that you kind of understand the concepts and work in an environment and kind of understand how to apply it. But yeah, we can look up and see what some of the more popular places are to get them.
yeah, no, that's completely true. And then to answer your second questions, like those red flags, um, a lot of like jobs really just kind of do that whole like keyword thing. So I don't know specifically like for what it is for like different jobs, but for web development, a lot of them ask you to do too much. So if a job is basically making you be the whole marketing team, that's a red flag. Like if they want you to be the web developer, the social media person, the copywriter, don't go for that. Because or go for that if they're paying you like 200, 300K, then yeah. But yeah, if you're like looking for like an entry level job and they're asking you to do everything, don't.
There's a lot of employers that will put out like almost like a Christmas list. They'll list everything that they can possibly think of that they need. And then they just kind of hope that somebody will meet some of those criteria. But it is something to be careful for, because it could mean that it puts you in a situation where the job is just untenable. You know, they have unrealistic expectations of what one person can do. In some cases, your role is to educate them on how much this stuff takes time, because there's a lot of people who don't realize they don't realize what goes into a social media strategy, or how long it might take to do analytics, or how hard it is to make a website that works and is responsive. You know, like they just don't understand. They just, think that they can give it to a support person and not a professional. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And then just going back to those posts, don't let like a little piece of an application or like something that they're looking for like discourage you from applying for something. Like if you feel like you're not meeting like that requirement, still apply. And then these are things that you can also like find out in interviews if they're like hard-headed and like making sure that you're actually meeting every single expectation to the T. Like you kind of get like a glimpse of the culture of the company. So maybe sometimes like a lot of the red flags you won't necessarily find in the post itself, but once you start interviewing. But yeah, you just have to kind of be wary. And like Cindy said, sometimes like you have to like let them know that this job is not just for one person. Like this is a team. Like
Yeah.
you need more people here.
I mean, when I started at Texas State, I was kind of the digital person. And so sometimes it just takes development over time. You have success, and then they realize that they need more people to continue the success, and then it sort of builds too. So that could also be the role. But I mean, those are definitely things to kind of like pay attention to and think about as you're looking at job descriptions, because there are just so many out there now. But that's good advice too about the what I said about the Christmas list. They just put everything out there. And if you can meet 70%, sometimes even less than that, then it's worth your applying. Don't let it like discourage you from applying just because you don't meet 100% of the requirements. Tony, what kind of question do you have? If you were still there with your hand up, yes.
Yes, I was going to ask something similar about sometimes you see all these postings and they want somebody to come in and have 1 or 2 years experience, but they want you to have a laundry list of skills. What would your advice be to like maybe to include in some sort of cover letter or something that will get you seen by somebody, and then it's a smart response so that maybe that you can get in front of somebody and have something to say about possibly working for them even in the entry position.
So
I guess how do you get people to pay attention to you so you can get some of these skills?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that is something that I want to bring up. So when I was applying, I always like kind of knew that I wasn't like gonna be the best coder that would apply, but I had other skills that I could like put up in front, and that's where like you really step away from these other candidates. So if you're a good communicator, a good problem solver, that's like where you should lead, because a lot of these people are really good at something, but they don't have what DMI teaches you and being like a good communicator. So in any company, you're going to be working with other people, and being able to like understand and being able to communicate what you're doing between those teams is essential. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't have those skills. So if you can market yourself as a good communicator, as a good problem solver, definitely add that to your cover letter, because that will put you already in front of people before you even have an interview.
Yeah, and that's definitely worked out a lot for people from our program. It gives them a different angle than somebody with a computer science background or other technology background. So yeah, it's a good answer. Sophia, I think you had your hand up before. Did you have a question that you want to ask?
They answered my question.
Okay, sometimes it's the same thing. Anybody else right now have a question for Juan?
I did
Go
actually.
ahead, Kayla.
So what basically, I know you said like the interview, like you had like back-to-back interviews, but like what were some common things in your interviews? Like especially if you were, you know, interviewed by several different companies or whatever, were there any common questions that like they all similarly asked?
Like what to be prepared for and what the tricky ones were. Yeah.
Yeah. So my goal was always to try to bring them back to what I wanted to talk about. So if I was gonna like say like I was a good communicator, I would always try to like connect that with the question that they were asking. But for like the companies that I applied for, most of my interviews always had like the technical interview. So where they make sure you actually know what you're talking about in the technical side of stuff. And then some of them like ask you like what you're passionate about. So for me, it's accessibility. So I can talk about that like all day. So I was like letting them know, and also being able to communicate that clearly to where you're not just like throwing a lot of information at them. So getting your point across clearly is also like a big deal. But yeah, I think if you can interview a lot and take those like practice interviews, I know Texas State had a lot of resources where they can help you like build your resume, and they also do practice interviews. Take advantage of those, because the more you get comfortable at like talking to like new people, the better it's going to be. Because I know when I first started doing interviews, I would stutter. I mean, I still do, but I would stutter like crazy, and I would just get nervous. My heart would start racing. I would like veer off into like a whole nother conversation, and then I would be like, oh, like why can I get this job? So it's just practice. But yeah, it really depends. Again, to go back to your question, it really depends on the company, like what they're going to ask you. But try to make sure you know like what you want out of the company as well, because an interview is not just you like wanting the job. It's like you should make sure the company is actually like a good fit for you as well.
Yeah, and being prepared, like you might not be prepared for every single question, but you can have anecdotes that can probably fit to just about, you know, have 5 or 6 anecdotes that might be able to fit in any range of types of situations. And you know, think about them ahead of time, because then you can be more articulate, you can be more clear in how you're communicating, and thus demonstrating your communication skills that you want to, you know, use as the sort of cornerstone of what you're doing. And then, you know, also researching the company to the extent that you have at least some knowledge about them when they're talking to you. And the key thing is have questions. When they say, do you have any questions for me? If you say, no, I'm good, you're not going to get the job.
Yeah, I mean, you have such a valuable resource in front of you. It's somebody that's been at the company for like a while, and they know like what they're talking about. So you can get a lot of information out of those people, and you can also kind of like set expectations or know their expectations of you before you start working there.
And then one thing that I hear from a lot of students is that they get asked the question, why company X? Like, why do you want to work for us? And sometimes that tricks them up if they're not ready for that question. It's like, I just want a job, pay me, right? Like that's what you really are thinking, but you need a good answer to that question. And that comes from the research of the company. This aligns with my personal values because of this project that you do, or, you know, whatever you can think of, but you have to be prepared for that to be specific. And they're not looking for one answer. They're just looking for how you craft your answers. So from all my years of myself interviewing and hearing about other people interviewing, those are like kind of the key things that I've gleaned. Junior, you have a question, got your hand up. What do you want to ask Juan?
Yes. So like speaking on like design experience, because I really want to go into like essentially graphic design. And like we have like the media design class, but you don't learn necessarily like the fundamentals or how to like go about designing in like a professional sense. So how did you overcome not having like the foundation or the basics of foundation or like of design?
Yeah, so I took the media design class as well. And I get like where you're coming from. Design for me has always been tricky because like the way I think of something might not necessarily be like the most efficient way to communicate something. So there's like certain rules that you learn over time and are like sometimes industry standards to like communicate a message. I think the way I overcame it was just by doing it. And I think that just goes for like a lot of stuff in like this program. I would honestly like submit projects that just didn't look good, and I would be like, okay, like I thought it looked good, but now getting this feedback, I understand like maybe it wasn't like the right way to approach it, and maybe I can like fix things. So it would be like doing something and trying like my best at doing it, and then getting feedback from other people and like getting their point of view helped me out a lot. Now like in the professional world, I don't really do a lot of the design myself for graphics specifically. We have like a team for that, but I work closely with them, so I've seen their process. So a lot of it just depends on like the message that you're trying to get across. We like work in like a pretty small team in like that department. Like the design team is like 2 other people, but yeah, it's just knowing what you want to get across and how you want to communicate that to people. So don't just like write a word in like your design, but like give it something that is going to make the people or like your audience like want to interact with it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be very technical or specific in terms of design rules. It really is about how you best communicate to an audience. And there are certain techniques that we talk about in the web design class that are simple techniques that suddenly make your sites look a little bit more professional. When you talk about like alignment or having the same logo on your page, the repetition, we just covered those in my web design class. So sometimes they're just easy things that take your work from being so-so or mediocre to like, oh, that's crisp now. And there are plenty of resources online as well to read about design trends. There's always different color trends and different feature trends. Now everything's very interactive. Bootstrap, the look of Bootstrap was a big trend for a while. We have a dominant image and then 3 columns with images at the top or little graphics at the top. So like paying attention to what the design methods are of the moment, I think is also kind of an important thing to do.
Yeah, and again, don't let like your personality get away or take away from like your design. Like you always want to like show yourself in these designs as well. So not just because you're like pushing something to an audience, it doesn't mean you have to like let go of who you are as well. Right. That's been something that was like really tricky working in like the corporate side of stuff, but like making sure your voice is heard is also like a big thing in design. You can always get your message across to an audience, but you don't want to let go of yourself either.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's a reason why they hired you. They want your input and your creativity, but then you do have to understand the framework within which you're working. Yeah. So I want to ask you, because these students are turning in their portfolios tonight, the first round of their portfolios, how important is a portfolio for, either the jobs you've had or just how you feel about it in terms of how you express yourself in the world and what they should be focusing on to have a good portfolio?
My portfolio was the reason I got both of my jobs, if that gives any importance to it. They are very, very, very important. So for my first one, that's like the very first thing we talked about. They're like, oh, like I was impressed with your portfolio. Like I really like how you did this. So that already shows like my skills in like web development and stuff like that. So you don't have to like impress them as much in your interview. And then that gives you the ability to talk about like your communication and like all your other intangibles that maybe you don't have like necessarily on your resume and your cover letter. And then for my second job, it was pretty much the same thing, being able to update everything like quickly, making sure like I catered my portfolio and my resume to the company that I wanted to work for was also good. But yeah, and thing I do want to point out is my portfolio was not the same as like when I was like in school. I was continuously updating it. Like I never stopped working on my portfolio. It's not currently live right now because I forgot to pay for the server.
I noticed that. I was like, you need to get that back, because if you need a
Yeah.
job and you have to hurry up and get it back, you don't want to be scrambling. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my fault. But yeah, no, it is super important to like make sure your portfolio is up to date and it shows off who you are. Because like for me, it wasn't like a super professional, crazy looking one, but it showed like who I was and like what I cared about. So I had a lot of pictures of my dog and like me doing stuff that I like, but I also like showed my skills of like what I could do coding.
Yeah, the projects you worked on and everything. And then I think that it's important because in this class, a lot of students have their initial website from web design and they haven't worked on it since even the first half of web design. And so this class gives them the opportunity now, like, what have you learned in our program that you can make to improve your portfolio, your presence, not just a couple tweaks to it, but like really think about it. And then I like that you said that you just want to keep working on it over time, because you want to keep improving it and keep demonstrating what you've learned and what you can do. Yeah, that's really excellent advice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no. So like the more you learn about like WordPress, Bootstrap, and like incorporate that to your portfolio. WordPress is obviously like the easiest one because it's so easy to manage and you can like make it look really cool. And there's like so many plugins that you can pull and it just looks amazing. But I remember like my very first website was like less than 100 lines of code, maybe, with like one picture and like maybe 5 buttons. To like, I don't know, I think my like latest one before I forgot to pay my dues to the server gods, I guess, was over 10K lines or something. But a lot of it was like taking inspiration from like other places and incorporating it in and like remixing them myself. So I would pull like a library from somewhere else and like incorporate it to my website, but it would look completely different than what I was bringing in. So being able to like know coding enough to where you can make it your own as well.
You know, I bet you could get in touch with Reclaim Hosting and they can bring your site back.
Yeah, no, it's
because that happens to students all the time where it's like they just missed it and they usually work with people. But does anybody else have a question for Juan at this point?
I have one more if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so how, like, do you ever feel overwhelmed with like all of the stuff that gets thrown at you? And when you do, how do you like deal with that?
That's a great question. You never get overwhelmed, do you, Juan?
Never, no. Yeah, no, I get overwhelmed a lot. So I guess it depends on like how much. Like for example, today I felt pretty overwhelmed because I was traveling back from Colorado. So I just
came back from
a few hours ago.
Colorado. He just got back and he's with us.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I had gotten off the plane. My boss like sent me a Teams message. She's like, "Hey, if something on Gannett.com broke, we need your help." I'm like, "I'm calling an Uber. I'm still like on the plane, but like I'll get to it." And I got home and I didn't even have time to like say hello to my dog because I needed to fix something. But it really depends. Like for me, I'm very thankful that I have a really good team around me that I can like reach out to if I need help. So I'm feeling overwhelmed in like a coding project, I know I have people that I can go to and be like, "Hey, I don't know like what's going on, but I need help here." That helps. Also like your work-life balance is super important to like deal with that kind of stuff. So making sure that that's pretty healthy. So for me, I like to disconnect a lot when I'm not working. I like taking my dog on walks. all that kind of stuff. And also with that, again, I work from home, so I get to do a lot of that. And then I also have my dog next to me almost always. She helps me out a lot. So if I do feel overwhelmed, I'll just be like, okay, I'm gonna take a step back from my laptop, close it for like a few minutes, go hang out with my dog, like eat something, go outside, get a little fresh air, and then come back refreshed and a little bit better to be able to tackle like the issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, it's just all about perspective, right? And having empathy for the other people who are trying to get you to do what they have to do. I mean, understanding like maybe there's a reason why they're pushing for it, but then also kind of understanding what your limitations are and what your abilities are. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, like if it's like for me, I have like multiple stakeholders that I like work with. So if I'm getting like a lot of projects, I'll just communicate with them and I'll be like, hey, like I'm actually working on like a lot of these other projects. Like I don't really have like the time for this right now, but I'll get back to it like as soon as I can. And like they understand like that you're human and like you can only do so much. So yeah, that's another like helpful little tip, but it really depends on like you, but you have to make sure you can distance yourself and separate yourself from like your work to like your personal life. You do need that balance.
I mean, it is those communication skills too, because if people are kind of hiding their true feelings or not expressing when they're overwhelmed or it's too much, that can lead to the burnout or, you know, people leaving or things not happening the way they're supposed to. So, you know, all those communication skills are so important. And people, I interview people all the time, former students, professionals that are in technical roles, and they always tell me that the hardest part of their job is communication, not the tech part. And we just think the communication part is the easy part because we communicate all the time and we're in a mass comm program. But, you know, clearly being able to communicate with your constituents, your stakeholders, and do that effectively is make or break sometimes. Yeah.
So then really quick, because you mentioned you work remotely, what does like your average work day like look like?
So I'm on a lot of meetings like pretty much every single day, but I try to like make sure all of them are like in the morning. So I'll get all my morning meetings done, make sure I know everything that I have to do by like a certain date or whatever. And then I'll take the afternoon to like half my focus time. So that's like stuff that you have to incorporate, especially like in a remote environment. A lot of like maybe like your coworkers don't really know like the other stuff that you have going on. So block time off to like work on like the projects, block time off for your lunch. Like working remotely sounds like super, super amazing, but it's very difficult to like stay on track and like work because you have all the distractions available like at like arm's reach. And it takes a lot of discipline to be able to like make sure you're like successful like while you're working from home. But I mean, it's again, it always comes back to like the communication, like making sure like you let people know like your availability, your like how much stuff you're taking in. So again, you don't get overwhelmed and you can actually do your job well.
Yeah. So with the few minutes we have left, because many of them are graduating, many of these students are graduating now or soon, what kind of advice, you've been given advice really the whole time, but what's your best advice for them in these last few weeks? We're like halfway through the semester now. What's your best advice for them to be doing right now?
Your portfolios, 100%. Make sure you're taking care of those. Apply. You can start applying now. Whenever, if you don't feel like you're again feeling like checking off every single thing on like an application, don't worry about it. Still apply. If there's like a job that you really want, cater your resume, your application towards like that job. That's been really helpful. And like show off like your intangibles, those communication skills, those problem solving skills. Like make sure you show them off in your interviews and your resumes, all that, because like Cindy said, like People are like in the professional world and they don't know how to communicate to their teams. And people are looking for that. People are looking for like people that can make the process a lot easier. And even just saying that you're a good communicator and like proving it can get you the job. You don't have to be the most talented person, but if you have those skills, you're so much more like above the rest.
Yeah, so that's really great advice. Yeah, this has been a really great session. And as Juan said to begin with, we didn't really talk about what he was going to talk about. And he really hit on so many points that we cover directly in this program and things that I think are related to the situation that you are in right now. So, I'm really proud of the work that you're doing and the role that you're playing, and really just love always hearing from you about how excited you are about your projects and the role that you're playing at Gannett. This is exactly the kind of job we want to see students get out of this program, where you're working in a communication media environment and integrating it with technology skills. And that opportunity is just huge. It just keeps on growing. So thank you so much for being with us. Let's give Juan a big hand. Digital hand. You can give the reaction hands. But no, really appreciate it. Always really nice to talk to you, Juan, and thank you so much for sharing everything that you have with the students today.
No, likewise. Like Cindy said, I was in y'all's position like 2 years ago, so I can understand like how it feels to be so close to graduating. But yeah, no, I'm very proud of y'all for making it this far. Very excited to see like y'all's future, and hopefully y'all are at MC Week in a few years doing like one of these speeches,
That's the one thing that I forgot to ask you at the beginning, because we've had this conversation before, but it's like when you were them sitting in the Zoom or in the chair and you were hearing a guest speaker, could you ever imagine being the guest speaker at that point? And now you've been a guest speaker many times for my classes. And so I'm sure many of you are feeling that way. So it happens. It happens very quickly sometimes. Yeah.
Very quickly. Yeah.
So thanks again, Juan. It was really nice talking to you, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.
Yeah, of course. Y'all have a great one.
Thank you. Get some rest now from your trip. And then play with Sadie.
Always. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.